Imagine having to choose between your business, your family, or your life. That was the decision confronting Vanderleer Grayburn, chief executive of a large international bank headquartered in Hong Kong. The lightly defended island of Hong Kong, which, on the 8th of December 1941, Imperial Japanese forces invaded. As its armies advanced, Grayburn was faced with an impossible dilemma, a challenge of integrity and humanity. During my own time running a bank here in the UK, I was lucky enough not to face any decisions of that kind of magnitude. But through the great financial crisis of 2008, I feel I did see some of the very best and the very worst of human character. And during that time, I became very interested in how leaders make their decisions, how they make decisions of integrity, and particularly how to do that under pressure. And I'd like to share a little bit of my journey with you now. And if it's okay with a little bit of participation? Yeah? Great. Okay. So let's go. Friday, the 4th of November, 2011. Day before Guy Fawkes Night, everyone's out shopping, getting ready for the big celebrations. I was running the bank, and at 2:32 p.m. that afternoon, our systems went down. Everything. Cash machines, payments, cards, telephone, internet, mobile, blue screen of death, can't happen, shouldn't happen. It happened. At 2:44, I was pulled out of the meeting I was in to be briefed on the situation. By 3:01, it was starting to become quite a big story, and the regulator called me up and yelled down the phone at me, "You better get yourself on TV right now. You better get yourself on TV right now." So, let's have a show of hands. Who'd go on TV? Who'd not? Few more nots than would. It's a really difficult decision. If you go out too early, you haven't got all the facts, but if you don't go out, then the story will be told without you there. Actually, funny enough, I once asked a group of people, who would go on television? One hand went up at the back, and I said, "And why?" It said, "To get on telly." I actually had a look. It was a big story, but it wasn't a broadcast story. And I thought, if I go out as the chief executive, I'll make it an even bigger story, so I made the decision not to. 3:17, the issue's still running, and the head of IT comes along and says, "Look, we need a decision. We can keep looking for the problem, and if we find it, when we find it, we'll be back up and running in a matter of minutes. Or we can go to our backup, our contingency. That will take 4 hours, but we will be up and running. You can't really do both. So what are you going to do?" Who'd keep looking for the problem? 1, 2. Who'd go to contingency? A big majority. And why? Typically because we like the certainty. We like the assurance that we will be up and running. But real life situation. Single mother goes to fill up the car with petrol, 2 screaming kids in the back, goes to pay with her only card, it doesn't work. What happens then? Do you have 4 hours? I didn't actually make this decision. One of the team turned to the head of IT and said, "What do you recommend?" That's a big call, right? That's a career-defining call. And the head of IT said, "Trust us, boss, we'll find it. Trust us, boss, we'll find it." And so here in the middle of this technological meltdown, it hangs on a question of trust and character. And we did trust him, and he did find it, and we were back up and running within a matter of minutes. I became very curious about how we make our decisions and how we decide what's right. And I started working with Professor Roger Steer, who helped me understand a very simple framework of how we decide what's right. And I'll share the very simplified version of it with you now. It goes something like this. As young children, we learn our first ethic. We learn that the right thing to do is to do as we're told. We learn the ethic of obedience, the ethic of compliance. We learn about the law, the rules, to follow the rules. But then as we grow a bit older, typically into our adolescence, we learn that sometimes the rules are there to be broken, And our compassion for our fellow human beings comes more to the fore. And the right thing to do is the thing that all our friends want to do. Our care, our compassion, our love becomes stronger. And then as we grow still older, perhaps we learn that not only are the rules there to be broken, but also what makes most people happy might not be fair or sustainable or prudent. And our principle conscience, our sense of values, perhaps our logic, becomes a little bit stronger. And in all of us, all of the time, we have these ethics swimming around, our love, our law, and our logic. And if you're curious about this, if you Google Roger Steer's moral DNA, you can do a simple online tool that will reflect back to you your own personal preferences in decision making. But let me bring it to life with an example. Anyone remember these? The one-day travel card, yeah? You used to buy them, and then you could travel all day on London Underground and all of that. And I was living in Kentish Town with my wife, and we would often go into town on a Saturday. We'd buy these tickets in the morning. We'd go off. We'd finish about 2 in the afternoon. And as we would be leaving Kentish Town tube station, my wife would give her travel card to the homeless person who was often sitting there by the entrance to the tube. Now, who thinks that's a good decision? Okay, who thinks it's not a good decision? So we've probably got about 90% of people thinking it's a good decision and 1 or 2 that don't. And why is it a good decision? Well, it's kind, right? It's compassionate. It's a caring decision. It's the ethic of love. But I say, what about the rules? Look what it says here. Not for resale. Okay, it's not resale, but saying, and what about the logic? What would happen if everyone did that? What principles are at play? Is it fair to the people that buy a ticket? These other questions you can ask. But has anything I've said changed the mind of anyone who thinks it's a good decision? My wife's neither. Because I guess our values, our beliefs, our ethics are very deeply held within us. I once heard someone say, a principle is what I use when I've run out of arguments. But they guide our decisions, and they guide our decisions daily. So in my experience, this is not just philosophical, it's deeply practical. Let me take you to another Friday afternoon when I was working at the bank. And I was on my way home, and I got a call. And they put through the finance director of a major FTSE 100 UK company who was fuming because they were trying to make a payment for £4,600 and it would not go through. I tried to calm them down. I called the head of operations. We went backwards and forwards and backwards. It got to about 9 o'clock that night, customers still screaming, etc. And then the head of operations said to me, OK, we need a decision. They check out. They've got most of the credentials, not all of the credentials. It's £4,600. What do you want to do? So let me ask you. Who'd make the payment? Show of hands. Who'd not make the payment? OK, we're probably about 50-50 on this one. So I made my decision. And I was actually going off on holiday that night. So I thought, well, this is quite interesting. So I wrote a blog, internal-only blog about it. And I left it hanging, and I went off on holiday. I came back a week later, and I couldn't believe it. There were hundreds and hundreds of comments on the blog. People arguing passionately, of course you should make the payment. It's just good customer service. It's only £4,600. Of course you shouldn't make the payment. It's breaking the rules, doesn't have the credentials. And I thought, this is fantastic. This is the organisation learning about its decision-making, learning about its values in real time. And I thought, I wonder if I can take this on a little bit further. So I started looking for the most difficult ethical decision that I could find anywhere. And I found one called Letters of Last Resort. Right now, somewhere deep in the ocean, there's one of 4 identical Vanguard-class submarines, and on those submarines are 16 Trident missiles, each with multiple warheads. They constitute Britain's last line of defense in the event of a nuclear war. On the bridge of each submarine is a safe, and in that safe is a second safe, and inside that second safe is one of 4 identical handwritten letters by the currently serving Prime Minister of the land, instructing the commander of the submarine on what to do in the event that Britain's been destroyed in a nuclear attack. Now, no one knows, obviously, what's written in those letters, but typically the prime ministers are given 4 options that they could choose from. Option 1, retaliate. Option 2, surrender. Option 3, put your submarine under the command of a surviving Allied power. Or option 4, make your own decision. So, let's have a show of hands. Option 1, who would retaliate? Few retaliators, great. Who would surrender? Show of hands, any surrenderers? 1 or 2, perhaps? Who would put their submarine under the command of a surviving Allied power? Quite a few more. And who would say, make your own decision? And again, a group there. It is, by design, a really difficult decision. So I did what any self-respecting person does when they don't know the answer to something. I went on the internet, and I asked ChatGPT to write me, I said, please write, I still say please to ChatGPT, please write me a letter of last resort. And there, among a beautifully written prose, were the words, I authorize the use of nuclear weapons. What do we think about Gen AI now? Let's have a look at the ethics behind each of those. What's retaliate? Well, there's a principle there. It's justice, and maybe a little bit of revenge. Surrender, that's compassionate. It's an ethic of predominantly love. Put your submarine under the command of a surviving Allied power, well, that's loyalty. And make your own decision, well, that's trust. Big, big trust. I don't know what the right answer is, but I do know what my favorite answer is. And that was written by David Rodin, who is a fellow at Oxford University specializing in ethics at war. And I'll read it to you now. The weapon under your command has one and only one function, to secure the United Kingdom by deterring our enemies. The fact that you're reading this letter means it has failed in this purpose. Retaliating now would cause endless suffering for no discernible purpose. I cannot countenance this. And I will not have the final legacy of our people to be the senseless destruction of millions of lives. I know that the desire for revenge must be strong. You would not be human if you didn't feel this. But reflect on the meaning of retribution. The civilians whose lives you would destroy, the teachers, parents and postmen, were not the ones responsible for the attack on Britain. To seek revenge on the guilty by attacking the innocent is not just iniquitous, it is incoherent. You are therefore ordered to render your warheads unusable by jettisoning them into the sea. Let this final act of heroic restraint be the testament of a people who, even in their final and most desperate hour, did not abandon their humanity. So I authorized the payment that Friday night, and at 9:02 on the Monday morning, the fraudster took the money out of the account and disappeared. I made the wrong decision, but perhaps more importantly, why? Did I not put enough emphasis on the rules? Was I too trusting? I'd like to think that I didn't balance my trust with enough prudence. But perhaps more importantly, I felt I was coming to understand more of how I and the organization was making its decisions every day on a daily basis, understanding more about our values, our integrity, and our humanity. And integrity and humanity bring us back to this man. And how did he make his decision? When did he send his wife safely home to London? I asked the archivist that question, and I'll read you her reply. He didn't. Greyburn and his wife Mary were initially held in the Sunwar Hotel with the other bank men and their families. In the summer of 1943, Vanderleer was imprisoned for his part in secretly smuggling funds into the internees at the nearby Stanley camp. He fell ill in prison but did not receive the medical attention he required and died on the 21st of August, 1943. Mary saw out the rest of the war in Stanley camp. There she took on the care of one of the bank children, Michael Hyde, who was left an orphan aged 5 when his mother died in the camp and his father was executed. After the war, she returned to England with Michael, whom she then brought up. So what do I take from all this? Well, these would be my top 3. Number 1, I think there was a time when I thought that being a leader was about being hard and tough, and sometimes it is. But the toughest decisions that I found myself involved in were the ones that required care and compassion. And it's interesting that the word courage is rooted in the French word for the heart. Secondly, maybe this isn't just a leadership thing. Maybe there's something, perhaps for all of us, in the thought that when we're looking at our decisions, be they the big ones or the small ones, to ask ourselves what values are at play, the love, the logic, and the law. And perhaps most importantly, that it's easy to make great decisions when the sun's shining, when the share price is up, when everything's going your way. Where it really matters is where it gets tough, when things are going against us, when in those darkest moments of the most difficult of dilemmas, are we able to keep our consideration of the rules? Are we able to think clearly through the principles and values that are at play? And are we able to retain our compassion and humanity for our fellow human beings? Because if we can do that, while I don't think we can ever know if we've made the right decision, what we can know is that we've made it in the right way. And, which is more, we know that we'll have been leading and living with humanity. Thank you very much.